Hello, everyone. Good morning and welcome to this session on the National External Diploma Program. Please take a minute to introduce yourself in the chat box, letting us know where you're joining us from. Again, thank you for joining us. My name is Bayo Adetunji, an education program specialist at the Maryland Department of Labor. I'm also your contact person for NEDP in the state. Good morning. So we'll get started in a little bit, but I just wanted to remind you that if you are having any technical difficulty, I'm going to be your support person today. Please send a personal text to me by clicking on the panelist. But if you'd like to share any information with all panelists and attendees, please remember to click on all panelists and attendees when you're typing your message. Good morning from Hagerstown, from Virginia. You're all welcome. I'm actually happy to welcome everyone to this, what I consider the inaugural NEDP session at the Virtual Training Institute. This is the very first time that we'll be hosting an NEDP session on this platform. And I'm so happy that you are joining us. The fact that you are here shows that you're interested in NEDP. Perhaps your program offers NEDP, perhaps not. Perhaps you're wondering, if my program doesn't offer NEDP, why should I care? And that's one of the reasons that we've invited our NEDP specialists, I should say, the experts, I should say, rather, to talk, just to share some basic information with you about NEDP. Okay. Welcome from Montgomery College, from Project Literacy. It's good to see you. Well, I have three presenters here who will be sharing this information with you today. I have Janita McNemar, the National NEDP trainer from CASAS, and I have Marci Leach from Chesapeake College. I also have Janet Hale from the Community College of Baltimore County. So if you have any questions for the panelists or presenters, please place in the chat box. And remember that you need to select all panelists and attendees. So without further ado, I would like to turn it over to the presenters. Janet?
Good morning, everybody. We are very excited to be here with you, and thank you to Bayo for introducing us. I'm going to stop my video right here so that I can check my notes as I move through this. We're all going to take turns sharing information with you this morning. So really, the objective today is to help you to acquire working understanding of the NEDP program, which is a National External Diploma Program. Then we also want to be able to share that the ways that you can apply it as an administrator, support staff, or instructor and tutor. Shortly here, in the next slide, we are actually going to find out who we have with us today. So really, we've identified three major buckets of folks here. We have our intake support staff. You might be the people that are providing the information session. You might be doing the triage to help determine where folks might find the most appropriate fit. You also might be gathering data for the program. Our second bucket are our instructors and our tutors. You might be the folks that are working through the NEDP flow. You might be working with the competencies within the program, or you might be helping with some of the content instruction. Our third bucket are the administrator folks. And you're the ones that are really the big umbrella. You're providing the communication about the program. You might be working with the outreach recruitment. You might also be working with the data. And then you're also really doing all the integral infrastructure that wraps around the program. So what we'd like to do is launch a very brief poll to find out who we have joining us today. So you should see on your screen right now a poll, which is asking what your role is within the program. So I see a little note here, Janita, that says the host and the panelists cannot vote. That would be us. Everybody else should have the opportunity to select. Are you IAS support staff? Are you program administrator or other leadership position within the program? Do you work primarily as an instructor or tutor? Are you an advisor or an assessor for the NEDP program? Or do you have some other type of role within the adult basic education programming? So if you'll just take a few minutes here and fill in the response that really applies to you most directly, that way we can get an idea of who we have joining us this morning. Okay, wow, that's interesting. So the largest group joining us this morning are the instructor tutor bucket. Very good. And we also have a nice array of other people on the call, all across the board here. So thank you for that. I think that you will find after today's presentation, you'll be able to leave with a little bit of something that's going to help you within your role to understand the NEDP program more efficiently. So a little bit about NEDP. It's been around for quite a long time. We are currently operating in 11 agencies across Maryland and the bordering states of West Virginia, Virginia, and DC. However, the NEDP program is national. So we're currently operating in 8 states and we're adding the 9th in 2021. So just in case you're curious about where NEDP lives, we're in California, Connecticut, DC, Maryland, New York, Rhode Island, Virginia, West Virginia, and New Mexico is coming on in January of 2021. So it's pretty exciting to know that NEDP is available in all these different areas and that Maryland is incredibly fortunate to have this opportunity to offer to our adult learners. So as we dig in even deeper in the NEDP program, there's 3 main roles that you will hear repeated over and over again. There's very, very distinct roles within the program. You're going to hear the word advisor. The advisor is often the first contact that our clients will have with the NEDP program. The advisors actually work through the client through the diagnostic phase. And you're going to hear the 3 distinct phases as well. We have a diagnostic phase, we have a generalized assessment phase, and then we have a portfolio review phase. So the advisor is the very first contact working with clients through diagnostics. Sometimes the advisors can also provide the information sessions. Sometimes they can help with the intake process as well, but they very specifically work with the diagnostic phase. The next role within NEDP is our assessor. So once the advisor moves the client through the diagnostic phase, the client is now in the generalized assessment. You're going to hear a little bit more about that phase throughout the course of this presentation. The assessor, though, is really working with the client through the meat of the program, making sure that they're working through all the different competencies. And then finally, you're going to hear a portfolio reviewer. So the portfolio reviewer is really the person that is coming in to do a clean, cold review of all the work that's been done by the client and the assessor. And they're the ones that are making sure that the integrity of the program is maintained, that everything demonstrates with 100% mastery. It's important for you to know that the advisor and the assessor can sometimes be the same person. And in some of our smaller agencies, we actually have that person doing both the advisor and the assessor role. However, the portfolio reviewer may never be the same as the client's assessor. They are 2 very distinct roles for a very, very important reason of maintaining the integrity of the program. So those are really the 3 main roles you're going to hear discussed amongst the NEDP program. So as I mentioned, the diagnostic phase, which the advisor is working with the client, really conducts several different key components. It is the very first phase of NEDP, and it consists of 4 open, which basically is unproctored assessments, and 3 closed, proctored assessments. So what we're doing right now in NEDP, we are incredibly fortunate to have the opportunity to be using remote services to work with our clients. So we have the ability to do all of our closed diagnostics in a proctored setting through Zoom or other platforms. So a client really does need to show their readiness for the NEDP program. It is not something that's going to be available for everybody to take advantage of. They demonstrate their readiness by earning at least a 236 or higher in reading, and I'm referring to our closed diagnostics here, or 226 or higher in math, and they're going to score at least a 3 or 4 on that written prompt. And you can see the different goals levels that we're using for the closed diagnostics. In addition, they're going to have the open diagnostics. Now, these are really interesting things that the client is participating in, and these are relevant to real world beyond the NEDP program. And I should mention that really what they're doing, the clients are doing in the NEDP program is relevant to anything they're doing in the workforce. So they're going to be working with a self-assessment checklist. The self-assessment checklist basically contains the meat of the program. Everything they would be seeing in the NEDP generalized assessment is covered on the self-assessment. It gives the client an opportunity to see what information they may already be familiar with, or perhaps they're not familiar with, and that they may need to take time to bring up some skills in those particular areas because they still will see that content. In addition, the technology skills self-assessment. Because NEDP is done online, clients do need to have at least a basic understanding and a basic comfort level with technology. So that gives them an opportunity to assess where their technology skills lie. The college and career competency. Now, this is one thing that is different from the NEDP program, from any other high school credentialing program, is that adult education should be viewed as a stepping stone to a future goal. That is why we have it as a part of our credentialing requirement. All of our clients are required to identify a college and career competency. And we can dig into that a little bit more, but that does prepare them for their next step. So as they're working through this program, they always have in mind what their next step is going to be beyond this particular program. And then finally, we have the ONET. And if anybody's familiar with that ONET occupational interest profiler, it is a fantastic tool that clients can use to help identify what path may be a good fit for them based on their interests and some of maybe their existing skill sets. So that is a part of the open diagnostics. So that's really what the NEDP diagnostic phase consists of. The next phase of the program is really when they start to jump into our generalized assessment area. What you're looking at right now are all our competency-based applied performance assessments that are presented through the NEDP program. The very first three are what we consider our foundational competencies. They're basic reading, writing, math, and digital literacy skills, and we find these incorporated in all the other 8 competency areas. The competency areas starting with cultural literacy are designed intentionally in an order of ascending depth of knowledge level, DOK. So it's important to know that the client doesn't work on all these at the same time. They're going to start working on them in order, starting with number 4 and down. So that is a quick overview of the competencies that you're going to find in NEDP. So let's talk a little bit more about what that generalized assessment process actually looks like. Once the client is in generalized assessment, they're doing activities at home. So within all the competency areas that we shared with the previous screen, they have different components. Activities that they can do at home are generally completed in over a 1 to 2 week period of time. The client is welcome to use any type of assistance that they may need to complete the in-home activities. And in fact, the NEDP program includes a wide array of resources embedded within the program itself. However, the client does need to make sure that they are the ones that are learning the different competency areas, because the next step in the process are the in-office checks. They are in proctored setting, and that's where the client has the opportunity to demonstrate the mastery of their skills. So the program requires 100% mastery of all the skills that are presented throughout the various competency areas. However, the client does not have to demonstrate them the very first time. That's where we go into post-task assessment. So if a client does not demonstrate mastery the first time, either in their activities or their in-office checks, they have the opportunity to go back and do what we call PTAs, post-task assessments, until they do demonstrate the mastery of that content area. And then you see the 4th step in the process, which I mentioned earlier, is a portfolio reviewer. So that's where the 3rd person steps into the picture. They're going through everything that the client and the assessor have worked through to make sure that it truly does demonstrate on every single item. So that's the real quick snapshot of the NEDP generalized assessment. So as we talk about the flow, it really could look different for every single client. The client could be working on take-home activities. They could be also work in one particular area. They could be doing in-office checks in another area. They could be going back and doing post-task assessments. So it really does kind of flow depending on the client. The goal is to keep them moving forward, so they always have something they can be working on and working towards their ultimate goal. So the flow depends on the client, but this kind of gives you an overall snapshot of the different pieces that are a part of the program. So that's a big overview. Let's dig a little bit deeper into the basics of NEDP 101. And here's really where we start to point out some interesting things for you. So folks often say, well, how do NEDP clients learn? Are they attending classes? Well, they're not attending classes, but they've already proven that they have the reading, writing, and math skills at or very near the high school level in order to move into the main part of the program. So clients have to have a certain level of high school readiness in order to participate. And that's where the assessment pieces come in the very first part of the program. So we already know that they have the ability to learn. We already know that they have the ability to understand. And within the program as well, they have ample amounts of resources and tutorials embedded. As I mentioned earlier, the clients can work independently at their own pace, doing the activities at home, and they're going to be preparing for those in-office checks. So the proctored in-office checks are technically where they are demonstrating their mastery of the content areas. So no, they are not attending classes. This is why this program works really, really well for busy adults, because they're not committing their time to attending classes. They're actually setting up appointments with their assessor to go through the various program areas. So how are they assessed? Well, we're assessing them against a standard of mastery. So as I shared earlier, the portfolio is initially evaluated by the assessor. They work very closely with the client to make sure that the areas demonstrate. Once all the areas demonstrate within a particular area, the portfolio reviewer steps in, and they're going through all the content areas with clean, fresh eyes. Adult learners within the NEDP program they're not measured against other adult learners. They are completing the mastery, they're mastering the particular areas on their own at their own time frame. Well, then what does the NEDP staff do? And more importantly, what they do not do? So as I shared, we have three main roles within the NEDP program. So the NEDP staff, they administer the program, they facilitate the client's progress, they evaluate the client's work against the evaluation criteria, they provide feedback to the client based on what's demonstrating, what's not demonstrating. And they make sure that the client, if they have questions, they make sure that they're getting appropriate resources. Number 4 is a great one. We always have clients that ask, and folks in the community, well, how long does the NEDP program take? We generally say the average is 6 to 9 months. It is possible, though, to complete sooner, and it's not unusual for clients to take longer. So much of this depends on what the client has outside of the NEDP program, what's going on in their working lives, other things they're trying to balance. But generally, it's about 6 months. Well, number 5, is NEDP easier than other high school equivalency assessment things? No, it's not different. It is different, but it's not easier. This is something we like to stress. It is a lot of work. The client has to take ownership of demonstrating every competency area to 100% mastery, but again, not the very first time. Some of the work is really challenging. Some of it replicates life questions. They're going to be digging into content areas that may be challenging for them. They have to do research. Maybe they're looking at geographic features that affect local economy. They're making presentations or creating Excel charts. The math is real life. It's dealing with money and measurement, which in some ways of thinking could be easier because they can wrap their head around that a little bit more. It's not some abstract concept. It really is a real life application. But really, the NEDP program is not timed. So folks that maybe do not work well under pressure, the NEDP program may be easier in that respect for them. So it's very different than some of the other high school type programs. However, it is not necessarily easier because the content does get to be pretty meaty in some of these particular areas. We often ask folks, they come to us saying, well, who is a good candidate for the NEDP program? So you want to make sure that candidates have good writing, math, and reading skills at the 9th grade level or above. Those are the hard skill pieces. But we also want to be looking at the soft skill pieces. And that's going to be, how is a client managing their time? Do they have good time management? Do they have strong work ethics? Are they motivated? Are they determined? Those are just as important as making sure that they have some of those hard type skills readily available. Many of our clients are coming from the high level ESL or ABE classes, and we're going to dig into that a little bit later. But we also understand that our clients have very busy schedules, and they maybe cannot commit to attending biweekly classes or classes on a regular basis. So the independent nature of the NEDP program works really, really well for our adult busy lives. So those are some considerations as we're thinking about who good clients could be. So number 7, do colleges and employers accept the credentials? So NEDP completers are earning a Maryland high school diploma. It is not just a credential from NEDP or from CASAS, they are actually earning a diploma. Most of the agencies that work with the NEDP program, they actually have a ceremony where the NEDP completers will walk across the stage and get their diploma. So it's a pretty exciting time for them. Number 8, is NEDP aligned with WIOA? Well, NEDP is well aligned because WIOA mandates that adult education incorporates digital literacy, critical thinking, integrated training, and utilizes community resources and systems. Those are already embedded within the NEDP program. So adult learners that have a high school credential through the NEDP program are well positioned to move into the workforce. And in most cases, they've already identified what their next step is going to be through the college and career readiness, which is a part of the NEDP program. So they are well in alignment with the WIOA program. Number 9, my agency doesn't offer NEDP, but I think this would be a fantastic addition for our agency. What can I do? Well, Baya was on the call with us today, and she works with the state and more specifically with the NEDP program. So if your agency is not currently offering the NEDP program, and you are seriously considering that this could be a good option for your students and clients, I would highly encourage you to reach out to her. So that's a little bit about the NEDP basics. There's so much more we can share with you. And we're happy to dig into any questions you might have. But now we're going to talk a little bit more about the intake and support staff.
Thank you, Marci. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. So the first specific audience, non-NEDP staff audience we want to talk to today is that intake staff and program support staff. You are frontline staff. You're the people who work with adult learners when they come in and register for your programs, or when they call in and say, hey, I want to get my GED. As we know, most learners have heard of the GED exam, and they refer to that almost exclusively when they want to get a high school credential. But just because a learner says, I want to get my GED, does not mean that this is the best option for them necessarily. So it's really important that frontline staff understand all of the options that your individual agency has for adults to help them with their goal of earning their high school credential. For many of us, that would be adult education classes to enhance and increase skill levels and prepare to take those sections of the GED exam. And of course, right now, most of those classes are being offered remotely. And of course, the National External Diploma Program. Some jurisdictions may have more options like credit completion or credit recovery programs. Whatever your individual program or area offers, it's so important that your program support staff, those answering the phones and speaking with people who walk in, know enough about the different options to be able to give appropriate basic information and the procedures for intake. They also need to have accurate contact information of those people who can answer additional questions or give more detailed information about the individual program options. Now, program intake staff should have a little more in-depth knowledge about the different options offered at your individual agency. They should be able to recognize the appropriate clients for these programs and understand the skills needed for success in each program. So in addition to the information Marci just presented about the National External Diploma Program, I want to share a couple of things that support staff can do to really get well informed and speak about NEDP. One is a YouTube video that's available. It's of a mock NEDP information session, and it was made by NEDP Director Margaret Kirkpatrick and our national trainer Janita McNemar, who will be speaking with you after my portion of the presentation. It basically tells the NEDP story and how to present it to clients who might be considering options at your agency. Now, it is just a sample so that you would want to make it specific to your agency. And there is a link to that I'm going to put in the chat box when I'm finished with my portion of the presentation. So since what we really want to do is to find the best fit for each individual learner that comes through our doors, the National External Diploma Program has great support documents on the professionals page that can be shared by NEDP staff for individual agencies in order to support their frontline staff and their intake process. And there is also a recording of a PD called Best Fit, using the NEDP information session to identify appropriate clients. So I will include that link in the chat box as well. Okay, Marci. So we know in this age of WIOA that data reporting and outcomes are very important. And we're all going after those measurable skills gains. So program administrators, you will be glad to know that even though NEDP is not a pre-test and post-test kind of system, which is normally how those MSGs are reported, there are 3 ways for NEDP clients to make NRS measurable skills gains. Now, on my latest research, and I hope this is correct, and I am going to keep it as simple as possible, this is what I am going to report to you. A client transitioning from the diagnostic phase to the assessment phase is a possible MSG. This gain is similar to an EFL gain in the sense that it only counts for a student moving from level 5 to ABE level 6, and based on moving from diagnostics to assessment. This gain can only be from ABE 5 to ABE 6. So if the learner entered at ABE level 4 as their entry level, the student won't show a gain in this way. So if a client comes in at the entry level and one of their subjects show level 4, but the other shows a level 5, that would be the level you want to report as their entry level so that they can get that gain moving from diagnostics to assessment. Okay, and then another way that an NEDP client can show a skills gain is by completing the program and earning their diploma. This is a reportable gain for all completers, and it's dependent strictly on completing the credential. And then the third is a follow-up outcome. After earning the high school credential through the NEDP, a client transitioning to employment or post-secondary education or training within a year after completion gets this reportable gain, but it is reported in the following year. So it is dependent on completing their credential and transitioning into one of these programs, either employment or post-secondary. The employment is, I think, found from a state data match, and post-secondary also by some indicator match with post-secondary institutions, or I believe that can be self-reported. I think there will be more information about this on Thursday when Bio and Doug do a presentation on making the best use of NEDP data outside of NRS data. Okay. So NEDP is an approved distance learning program in many states, and it is approved here in Maryland. If you're participating in this institute today from another state, you should look into it in your state to find out if it's approved or what needs to be done to get it approved. So many programs underreport their learners' hours. So it's important to know that NEDP has built-in structure right in the system for reporting hours and time that learners are working in the program. The NEDP online system does count the hours that clients spend working on their independent tasks away from the office or separate from their contact time. NEDP administrators can run the agency hours report, which shows the actual hours that clients spend on the system, along with that independent distance learning time. They should also be given credit for their face-to-face contact time, whether that time is in person or conducted remotely. This contact time is when clients may be working with their advisor or assessor, completing items and diagnostics, or completing their in-office checks and their post-task assessments. So really, NEDP is operating as a blended learning program. But because of the amount of work that learners are going to be doing away from your site and away from your proctoring, it's very possible that they will end up with more than half of their hours as distance or proxy hours. Now, only NEDP administrators can run the agency hours report, which you can put in and run it for a time frame for the whole agency. However, NEDP site staff can run a time on task report for their individual clients, but that can't be run for a particular date range. And unfortunately, at this time, the time that clients spend on the diagnostic instruments are not captured within the system. However, you can keep track of that when you have contact time with your clients. So one of the things that NEDP trainers hear about the most from NEDP administrators and agency administrators is program growth. They want tips on how to grow and strengthen their programs. So let's talk about some of the steps in doing this. First, there is an NEDP website that is specific for growing and strengthening your program, and it's called 5 Hallmarks of a Successful NEDP Agency. There's a video recording of that webinar on the NEDP Professionals page. So if you have access to that Professionals page, you can easily get it there. If you don't have access, you just let us know and we can make sure we share it with you. An important document that goes along with that webinar is an NEDP action plan. It's something you can use to do a self-assessment of your agency on those 5 hallmarks, and then plan how you'll make up for any places where your program can be stronger. And it can help you put out a plan for the next 6 months or maybe the next program year in order to do more outreach, strengthen your staff, do more PD, or whatever your agency may need to strengthen the NEDP. And if you want help with an action plan, a good resource would be your state trainers or Janita, who's also a wonderful resource. So next is a periodic desk review. It's a really good way for NEDP administrators to make sure that the program procedures are being followed, which help keep programs strong. One important thing to check is if work is being assessed and released within a 2-week period. We're all working on that 2-week time frame in NEDP. Clients are supposed to finish their work within 1 to 2 weeks, and assessors and reviewers are assessing that work and releasing those results within that same 1 to 2 week period. So it's great to go onto the system, make sure that things are being completed in a timely manner. If you're not sure how to perform a desk review, there's also a PD for that, and that's also on the professionals page. Another recommendation we would give is to hold regular NEDP staff meetings. It's really beneficial for your NEDP staff to get together to have consensus discussions, to talk about what's new in NEDP, look over monthly newsletters and release notes that have come out, and basically just talk about things, how they're going with your client and so forth. NEDP is so individualized, it's really easy for us to get separated from one another and kind of work in our own little silo. So bringing assessors together can be very helpful. And the next recommendation for strengthening a program would be professional development. Now, during this current year, Maryland requires NEDP staff, they're going to need to get at least 10 hours of professional development. So in addition to any local training you may do, Janita and co-trainers do periodic continuing PD, which are recorded and uploaded onto the NEDP professionals page. So there are plenty of PD activities available. Another important thing to help ensure program growth is to make sure your community and WIOA partners know about the NEDP. Market and promote your program by speaking at meetings of different area partners and community agencies and things of that nature whenever you can. It's very important. And agency administrators can do a lot to help with that as well. And lastly, connect with your state trainers and your state mentors if you have them for strategies for support. If you have specific training needs, talk to your state trainers, talk to Janita, and hopefully then that could get planned and implemented for you. So as Marci mentioned, if your agency doesn't currently offer the National External Diploma Program, you can establish a referral process with agencies that do have NEDP in order to refer learners who may be perfect for the NEDP. And also you can contact BIO and to see how you can become an NEDP agency if that's something that looks like you want to be taking part of. Okay.
Thank you, Janet.
Sure.
And Marci. Welcome, everybody. I'm Janita McNemar. It looks like the largest part of the group we have here today are people who are providing instruction and tutoring, possibly for NEDP clients, possibly for people before they enroll in NEDP. So let's talk about how to kind of front load some skills to help potential clients be successful and how to provide some tutoring when people are actually in the program to help them be successful. So let me start by saying that in Maryland, there's a statewide rule that if a client is enrolled in NEDP, they may not be co-enrolled in an ABE or ESOL program. So keep in mind that if you've got a client who's entered NEDP, they can also come into your ABE, cannot come into your ABE classes and kind of double dip on the federal funding that way. But don't let that make you think that there's no help available for your clients. First of all, programs can front load a lot of instruction that help gear clients, potential clients up for the rigors that are coming in NEDP. And even clients who are currently enrolled in NEDP can get instruction in a number of ways. And as Marci mentioned earlier, you know, there are cut scores that are requirements, CASAS cut scores for NEDP clients. So we know that they've got reading, writing, and math skills that are at or very close to the high school level when they enter this program, but that doesn't mean they're not going to learn things once they get in there. And the ways they can learn are clients can be hooked up with literacy volunteers or folks from libraries. There are NEDP resources in nearly every competency in the program and tutorials in a lot of competencies as well. And those tutorials are offered through they are videos, and they also have an associated transcript. So if someone has a problem watching a video or a special need where they aren't able to view a video, they can always view the written tutorial and get help on specific math and digital literacy skills that way. An assessor or advisor can never provide instruction to their own clients. We're completely forbidden from providing instruction because we don't want to muddy the water between assessment and instruction. But we can refer folks to literacy volunteers, libraries, instructional materials, whether those are paper or websites. And of course, clients can use any resources they have in their own lives. If they have a sister-in-law who's really good at math, that person can help them with their in-home activities in math. They have a best friend who's really good with writing, that friend can help them work on their resume, with the understanding that the work that they do at home is unproctored, but the work that they'll do in their in-office checks with their assessors will be proctored work. So we talked a little bit about how support staff could do a little pre-screening and triage to help identify good candidates for NEDP. But I would posit that those of us who are teaching in upper level ESL classes or teaching in ABE classes or even in high school exam prep classes can look at our group of students and say, who might be a good candidate for NEDP? Maybe some people who are pre-NEDP in those ABE and ESL classes who might move up to this program, or maybe folks in your high school equivalency prep classes who are just not making it in those classes. Maybe they don't do well under time constraints. Maybe they have a lot of test anxiety. But keep in mind that there may be candidates who you can refer to an NEDP program at your agency or at another agency in Maryland. If you have people who are working really hard but just can't get that 5-7 points they need on the math test, or people who all of a sudden have taken on a full-time job and they really want their diploma, but they can't come into classes every Tuesday and Thursday night from 6 to 9. This is a program where they can work independently. After they get through those first diagnostic tests, nothing is going to be timed. So there definitely is kind of an associated population of adult learner that we think of as being NEDP appropriate. Keep in mind though, especially those of us who have been in adult ed for a long time, we might remember the old paper pencil portfolio NEDP program from before CASAS took it over as being kind of the easy alternative to the high school equivalency. That is no longer the case. Let me disabuse you of that notion if you still have it. NEDP is not an easy alternative to the high school equivalency test like the GED. As Marci mentioned earlier, it's different from those tests, but it's a lot of work. But I would say that, I've had students in my classes who worked really, really hard to pass the high school equivalency test. And maybe those 3 times a year that they were allowed to take the math just didn't do it for them. They needed more opportunities to learn and to be assessed and to show what they knew. And for those adult learners, NEDP tends to be a much better solution. So let's talk of the reading, writing, and math skills that a successful NEDP client will need. For reading, clients have to be able to comprehend complex tests. And those of you who have been trained in college and career readiness standards know that this is a big CCRS focus. So we're looking at questions at DOK or depth of knowledge levels 1 through 3. We start off with some easier DOK type questions in health literacy, where clients are basically going in and finding information, searching for items in text, searching for information in text, recalling that information. And then we build into higher depth of knowledge as the clients go through the portfolio. Later on, they'll be asked to do more summaries of things that they've read, make predictions based on things that they've read. And then eventually, we're even getting into some DOK3 higher level reading skills of evaluating what they've read and drawing arguments based on the reading. Keep in mind though that these reading activities are all going to be within the context areas of the skills that matter: civic participation, health literacy, financial literacy and consumer awareness, lots of digital literacy opportunities. All of that reading is in content areas that have real life correlation to adult lives and adult work. So to prepare for the writing that's coming in NEDP, I'm going to skip down to the bottom and say that there are 2 ways that writing is basically evaluated in NEDP. In the diagnostic phase, clients respond to a written prompt with an expository essay, and that essay is going to be evaluated on, does it respond to the prompt and develop a main idea? Usually the prompt is a 2-part question. Do they respond to both parts? Do they develop that writing with sufficient detail? Is their writing well organized? And finally, do they adhere to standard English conventions? If they do, they score a 3 or 4 on a score between 1 to 4, and that shows readiness to enter the generalized assessment phase. Once they get into generalized assessment, there are a lot of short answers. They say goodbye to multiple choice questions when they enter the generalized assessment phase. No more multiple choice questions in NEDP at all. So most of what they write are going to be short answers, slightly longer answers, and then there are a few places where they're writing an extended response. And when we evaluate their responses, we're really focusing on their ideas behind their writing, not so much the perfection, the standard English perfection of their writing, with a couple of exceptions. We want a perfect resume, right? We should train adult learners to know that a resume should be without errors. Same with a cover letter, that's going to be error-free. But other than that, the few longer pieces of writing that they'll have to submit, we're basically evaluating on content, on fluency, on clarity, and not as much on grammar and mechanics and punctuation, as long as we can see the ideas of the client clearly through their writing and we don't have to infer meaning. Another thing that we're going to do with writing is start to talk about how to avoid plagiarizing other people's ideas, how to paraphrase, how to cite your sources. This is a really important skill that any of our clients who are going to move on to post-secondary education will need to know. So we're using a plagiarism and citation document, so everyone's referring to the same APA guidelines to evaluate, to cite their work. And finally, in math, as was mentioned before, the math is almost entirely about money, because that's where we use mathematics in real life. We also use it with measurement, so there are some measurement competencies, but none of the math kind of exists in this ivory tower sort of theoretical place. The math all has a real life application. And as Marci mentioned earlier, I think that does make it easier for clients. The work always is easier when I think it has application to real life. So clients need to be very well versed at that intermediate math skill level of understanding parts of a whole, decimals, percents, and fractions. They should be able to do some estimating, some mental math, and they'll have to do some graphing on a spreadsheet, spreadsheet software. Okay, so our challenge as we're assisting a client who is in NEDP, and this is as an instructor, as a tutor, as someone who's allowed to give assistance to an NEDP client, is to teach to the underlying skill that's being measured without teaching to the actual task. So I'm going to give you a few examples of how we do that. One is that we have to back up and kind of consider the purpose of what's being measured. And instead of dealing specifically with the task at hand, we can measure that skill by using an alternative example. So one example of how to do that is in analyzed film elements. Clients are given a list of 3 possible films they can view, and they're given a list of literary terms, cinematography terms, and they're going to analyze that film using the elements that they've learned in the resource of theme, setting, plot, character development. Well, we can work with them to help them understand those literary terms by using one of the films that's not an option in NEDP. And one I've used often is Grease. We're going to give you an example of how to do that coming up in just a few slides. Everybody's seen Grease. It's an easy one to talk about. You can discuss the difference between theme and plot. You can talk about the setting and so on. And you're teaching that underlying skill of learning those film element terms without teaching to the task of Citizen Kane or To Kill a Mockingbird or one of the other films that's allowable in NEDP. I'm going to check my chat, make sure I'm not missing something. Okay, looks like Marci's handling that. Thank you. Another example is in the scientific method. This is a place where clients are given a resource that tells them about the steps of the scientific method and some important terminology like dependent variable and independent variable. And then they're given some example scientific experiments to apply those terms to. Well, if we were helping a client who was struggling with this activity, or we wanted to sort of front load how to use those terms in an ABE class before the client had enrolled in NEDP, we could do that by creating a different experiment altogether from the one that's used in NEDP, and use that different experiment as an opportunity to practice those scientific method steps and terms. Another way you can help to teach to the underlying skill is to teach clients to self-assess their own work. So this takes you as a tutor or instructor out of the picture as the person who's evaluating their work and puts the client into that space so that the client can, in this case, the client's going to have to give a presentation about the US Bill of Rights, choosing one of the first 10 amendments and applying it to a current or recent event that shows how that amendment was upheld or jeopardized or denied. So we wouldn't want you as the tutor or assessor to pre-screen their work and tell them, yeah, this looks good, this looks like it's going to demonstrate, because that can be a really tricky situation if the assessor finds something did not demonstrate. So you don't want to put yourself in the role of the pre-screener. Let the client screen their own work. So you could record the client's practice session, their practice presentation, asking them to use the instructions of the activity and just kind of go through that list. Did they hit all of these 9 or 10 points they were supposed to hit in this presentation? Because the instructions will perfectly mirror the evaluation criteria. The client is going to be evaluated on exactly what they're asked to do. No surprises in NEDP. So they can use the instructions and self-evaluate their own work. And that's a really important skill, to be able to pre-screen and self-evaluate your own work. That can be used not only in NEDP, but in so much of what we have to do in real life. So a few additional strategies. We talked about using the resources and the tutorials provided in the program. Some of these are PDFs, and the client could print those out and you can use them together. Some of them are websites that are available to everyone. You know, just make sure that you're using the same resources that NEDP is referring the client to. I would say that it's important to facilitate the client's understanding of those underlying skills by asking more questions than you answer. And we're going to give you an example on that in just a moment. Know your client. Is this someone who does just as well with online learning if they need to kind of back up and relearn a skill or freshen up on a skill? Is this someone who does just as well online as they do with paper pencil? Is this someone who really needs to be able to work with someone face to face? They really need to be referred to a literacy volunteer or a tutor, someone who can, you know, actually talk this through with them? Or is this someone who's independent and really just needs a workbook or to be referred to a website? It's a good idea for the tutor and the assessor to communicate, so the assessor can let the tutor know, you know, for instance, back at that Bill of Rights activity, you know, this client is doing beautifully on everything on this activity, except that they're not giving their personal view of the issue at hand, or they're not making an explicit connection between the activities and the amendment. You know, so having that communication with the assessor can be really useful in helping the client move through. We gave you some examples of creative ways to practice. Building a community of learners when possible is a really fun idea. We talked a little bit about using that film Grease as an example, you know, as a substitute film on which to apply those cinematography terms. You could have everybody come into your adult ed center at least one of these days when COVID goes away, and everyone could watch Grease together, or one of the films that's not loaded or not used in NEDP, and use that to not only practice those terms of cinematography, but also to build a community of NEDP clients who can work together. And our West Virginia program is fantastic at doing that. Their clients are really a community of learners, and that's a great driver of learner persistence. And finally, you should not be touching their keyboard. Whenever I see a tutor or a literacy volunteer with their hands on the client's keyboard when the client is working through NEDP, I say, get your hands off that keyboard. Only the client should be typing anything in, opening a resource, opening the tutorial, navigating between tabs. If you're doing it for them, then they're not building the skill themselves. And when they get into the proctored in-office check, they're going to fall because they haven't had a chance to get strong in the skill on their own at home. Okay, so let's just do a really quick example discussion of what these tutoring things might look like. And I know we're getting low on time, so we'll do this rather quickly. Okay, Marci, can I have you be my client here, please?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, this question asks how old you have to be to serve as a congressman in the House of Representatives.
Okay, you need to go to resource R1.
Well, where? Can you show me the link? Can you send it to me?
Sure, I'll send it to you. Click.
Okay, I'm clicking on the link. What? I can't read that old-timey kind of English. What is it saying?
Oh, that language says you have to be at least 25. Now go back to your NEDP page, click, and put that answer in question 2 in the competency. Okay, clearly, guys, you can see that our tutor has done too much for the client, right? You're really not facilitating their learning. You're really kind of doing a lot of this for them. You're not there to paraphrase. You're not there to get on their keyboard and take them here and there and everywhere. You're here to facilitate. So let's look at what that might look like. All right, Marci, you ready?
I'm ready.
Take 2.
Well, this question asks how old you have to be to serve as a congressman in the House of Representatives.
Okay, where do you go to get that information?
Oh, yeah, the resource.
Right. And where do you find the resource?
Well, let me see. Okay, it's here on the page. Click.
Okay, you have some reading to do on that resource. Feel free to print it out if you need to, and let me know if you need anything else.
So does this mean you have to be older than 25?
Well, what does it say?
It says, no person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years.
Can you put that in your own words?
So basically it means you have to be at least 25.
And where would that answer go?
I have to tab back to the activity page.
Thank you, Marci. I hope you see in those two examples how when the tutor or literacy volunteer gives too much information, they're kind of doing it for the client. In the kind of sweet spot example that we gave you last, the tutor is not ever telling the client, yes, you've got this right. This will demonstrate. Demonstration, by the way, is NEDP language for getting it correct and complete. So they're not assessing the work. They're not giving any answers. They're reminding the client, kind of pointing out where they need to go, or to get the information that they need. They're asking more questions than they're giving answers. I know a lot of questions are coming up in the chat box, so I'm going to go over to the PowerPoint, and the rest of the slides that we have are basically just more examples of how to teach to the underlying skills. So let's make sure that we get all your questions answered before we close today. It's a question of vocabulary. Can you help with the word? You know what? I think that an assessor could definitely not help with the word. An assessor couldn't give the vocabulary word. If I were the tutor, I would say, when you don't know the meaning of a word, what are some skills or strategies you can use to find the meaning of that word, rather than just telling them what it is? Because it's kind of the give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. It's an example. In that example, if the client knew what to do to find a vocabulary word that they didn't know the definition for, you're giving them a lifelong skill. Okay, any other questions we missed? Did we get everything else?
Janita, there is a question about the C and D level test. The question reads, I want to know if we should give the C and CD tests only or give the clients the appraisals first before giving the actual assessments. So I had mentioned that we do use a C and CD level test for diagnostics, but she's curious about what can be used for assessment and appraisals like they give to prospective ABE, GED, and ESL students.
The diagnostic test for NEDP, the test that must be given at the beginning of the program to determine those cut scores, are the D level reading and the CD level math and goals. If you have a client or an adult learner who's in an ABE class or an ESOL class, I think it's a smart idea to give the appraisal if you're giving paper pencil tests. Of course, the locator is built into e-tests, so if you're doing e-tests, you've kind of got it already there. But it's frustrating for a client or an adult learner to be given a test that's too difficult for them. So that appraisal will kind of keep that from happening. It will make sure that if a client really is operating at the B level in reading, the appraisal will put them in the B level. Or, that way we don't get them in a test that's too easy or too hard for them. Okay, Montgomery County does not have NEDP, so can my clients take the program in Prince George? I think so. Bio, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, Rainey. NEDP, prospective NEDP clients are free to participate in the program at any location that is closest to them. You do not have to attend the one that is in your county, as long as you're a Maryland resident. So Maryland has certain eligibility requirements to participate, but you should feel free to, participate in the program wherever you feel like. So.
Okay, and there was a question about the kind of support that people can receive. I hope that was made clear with the tutor dialogue, just to give you an idea of how to ask questions instead of giving answers, how to point people to the right direction so that they have access to their resources. Okay.
So thank you so much. I do appreciate you. Thank you for your participation. I'd like to thank Janet, Janita, and Marci for giving us so much to think about. And I hope that the presentation has been beneficial and you will be able to go away with some information today that you didn't know about NEDP before you joined this presentation. So I'd like to remind you, if you have any questions, please place it in the chat box. If we're not able to respond to your question now, we can always address that question at a later date. I'd like to remind everyone that if you're interested in a certificate of attendance, I did place a link in the chat at the beginning, and I can place it there again in case you missed it. You do need to fill out that Google form only once and select all the sections that you participated in that you would like to receive recognition for. Also, there will be a survey that you should receive a link to a survey right after the presentation has closed. Again, thank you so much for your time and for your participation. So are there any questions? If not, thank you, everyone.